Talk about that and much more Florida politics coming up at 9:18. Every once in a while, I see a headline that just makes me sigh and scratch my head and think, this isn't good. This is not going to end well. I'll tell you that story at 9:38. If you've gotten a new driver's license in the last year or so, you're going to want to make sure you're listening to our conversation with Broward's Supervisor of Elections at about 9:48. An hour from now, a story that I absolutely love, an idea I've suggested in the past. And now one town in New Jersey has passed a law to hold parents accountable, even criminally liable for their kids' actions. I love it. We'll talk to a lawyer in New Jersey about it at 10:06. 10:18, we'll go live to Anchorage, Alaska, talk about preparations for tomorrow's summit between President Trump and Russian leader Vladimir Putin. The first day of school in Miami-Dade County, the last district in the entire state. Today, getting underway, we'll speak with the superintendent, Dr. Jose Dotris, at 10:38. Then, of course, after the 11 o'clock news, we will open up our phone lines, take your calls as we do each and every day until 12 noon. Before we get to all of that, though, this is another one of those stories I told you about months ago. Like back in the spring, I told you we would be talking about this very thing. Despite all of the hoopla and the wild claims early in the year, it is about Doge. And I said last year when the idea of the Department of Government Efficiency was first proposed, I said this could be the greatest thing to happen to our government in generations, or it could be the biggest disaster to happen to our government in generations. Turns out, well, it's ended up being neither, at least thus far. As Mediaite points out, Doge has drastically exaggerated its government spending cuts and saved a literal fraction of what they are boasting, according to a new deep dive analysis from Politico's Jesse Blazer. He went into all the public data, the government's own records, for a report that accuses Doge of using faulty math to overstate their massive savings calculations. According to the Doge website, the agency estimates it saved more than $200 billion overall, which they say equates to more than $1,000 for every taxpayer. That's great, right? That total number comes from slashing workforces, canceling contracts, grants, and more. I will point out, as I digress, Elon Musk first promised Doge would save $2 trillion in American taxpayer monies, then lowered that to $1 trillion. And then before he left Doge to go back to try and save Tesla, he again lowered the savings to around 150 to 160 billion. His words. Of the billions in contracts that were canceled under Doge, Politico could only verify that a fraction had actually been canceled. Through July, Doge said it had saved taxpayers $52.8 billion by canceling contracts. But of the $32.7 billion in actual contract cancelings are all that Politico could verify. Doge's savings over that period were closer to $1.4 billion. Not the $52.8 billion they claimed. Despite the administration's claims, not a single one of those $1.4 billion will lower the federal deficit unless Congress steps in. Instead, the money has been returned to the agencies mandated by law to spend it. Again, these are checks and balances to out-of-control actions by somebody. The analysis ultimately found that Doge saved less than 5% of what they claimed from more than the 10,000 alleged contract terminations. White House Principal Deputy Press Secretary Harrison Fields defended Doge's calculations, saying they are, quote, rigorously scrubbed. Turns out, a lot of Doge's work has been nothing more than smoke and mirrors and hype. Many of the contracts they claimed to have been canceled had already been paid. Some were double counted. On an $8 million savings was initially labeled $8 billion in savings. Politico found that roughly 40% of the contract entries on Doge's own wall of receipts couldn't even be verified because of redacted or a lack of data. Federal spending, by the way, has risen about 6.3% thus far in the 2025 budget year over the same period a year ago, according to Wharton's budget model. Don't get me wrong. The original promise of $2 trillion would have been amazing. Even $1 trillion would have been an incredible accomplishment, but we're down to less than 8% of the original promise, and the numbers keep shrinking. Even if DOGE saved some money, agencies are required to spend the funds that have been appropriated to them by Congress unless Congress rescinds them. Because let's not forget, despite the fact that Republicans in Congress have basically ceded all of their constitutional power and authority to the president, cowering at every turn for fear of MAGA retribution, it is still Congress that controls the nation's purse strings. And don't forget, money Congress did claw back thanks to DOGE. Remember that $9.4 billion rescission package? Cut a little over $1 billion from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which funds NPR and PBS. Another $8 billion or so from USAID and some other groups. So those were savings, legitimate savings. And don't get me wrong, savings is a savings. But in the end, DOGE's rollout was a disaster. Slashing and burning departments and staffers initially, firing thousands of people, many of whom had to be hired back or whose firings created disasters for the American people who relied on those departments. Very few of those, very few Americans benefited from any of those moves. And in the end, and this could change, but by far DOGE ended up being much ado about nearly nothing. A lot of bark and no bite, mostly window dressing, nothing but political theater. And just a reminder, yesterday the Treasury Department reported that our national debt had now officially surpassed $37 trillion. 10 years ago today, it was a little over $19 trillion. This is a disaster created by both parties, and very few in Washington, D.C. have shown any real interest in addressing the problem, but some of them do talk a really good game. Would love to hear what you think when we open up our phone lines after the 11 o'clock news. Coming up next, we'll talk a little Florida politics. Before we get to that, though, I was always hesitant, I tell you this all the time, about ever contacting one of these wealth management companies because, I'm not wealthy. But I did have a retirement, 401k here at work, IRA, kids' college funds and stuff. And the closer I get to retirement age, if I'm lucky 10, 12 years from now, the more concerned I got about whether my investments were going to work out the way I envisioned. So I reached out to Trajan Wealth. And the reason I reached out to them, multi-layered, but first of all, the group's founder and CEO, Jeff Jr., and his wife, both military veterans. I value that. I knew that they would bring discipline to the process. And then I realized, well, Trajan Wealth, they are fiduciary advisors. They have to put my needs first. And that's the thing that really locked me into them. It's not just wealth management, retirement planning they really are a one-stop shop because those things won't all take care of themselves if you just ignore them. Even if you've already got a retirement plan, a second opinion isn't going to hurt you. Make sure that your money's where it needs to be in your investments. And their consultations are complimentary. So what have you got to lose? Call them today, 954-250-5000. That's 954-250-5000 or TrajanWealth.com online, TRAJAN Wealth.com. Advisory services offered through Trajan Wealth LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor, paid advertisement.
Southbound 95 express lane shut down on the Golden Glades interchange from the Palmetto Expressway exit to Northwest 151st Street. On I-95 southbound at Ives Dairy Road, a broken down vehicle is blocking the left lane. This report sponsored by Whole Foods Market. Save up to 40% on back to school with lunch